Welcome to the TINR Oral History Project. My name is Toni Brackus Hoffman, and I welcome Leroy Fadem to be interviewed for this program. The date is July 30th, 2019. Lee is a distinguished member of Temple Israel of New Rochelle. He is our most senior past president and a more than 50-year member of our Board of Trustees. In addition, it's my privilege to interview him because he is a very dear friend. Lee, would you like to describe your life and your earlier years?
Sure. All of my grandparents left Poland pretty much in the same time, going in different directions. I think they left in the 1880s, early 1880s, and my father's parents went to London because they didn't have enough money to make the trip to the United States. My mother's parents, or at least individually came from Warsaw, and they came to Philadelphia, where my mother was born. My father was born in London, so we have a very mixed parentage. Anyhow, my father's family came with all of their children. At that time was 3. He was the 3rd, all born in London, and then 2 more were born in the United States. And they came to this country, and as I say, my mother was born in Philadelphia. I don't know much about their early life. I can tell you that it was not terribly, they weren't terribly religious for a variety of reasons, but so that when I was aware enough in my own upbringing, we were not an observant house, although in my early days my mother kept a kosher home, and she thought my father wanted it, and he thought she wanted it, and when they finally got together and talked about it, after a number of years, they finally agreed that neither one of them wanted it, and we went on from there. But we still had 2 sets of dishes and 2 sets of silverware and everything like that. My father attended a local shul, which was a very small Orthodox, which was within walking distance of our home, which was in the 2nd floor of a 2-family house.
Lee, was this home you're talking about, this is after your parents moved to the United States?
We moved to Brooklyn.
You moved to Brooklyn?
Yeah.
And that's where you essentially...
That's where I went to school. Grade school, I went to junior high school, and eventually we made other moves also, but that was where my early years were. And my father and mother wanted me to be bar mitzvahed, but this little shul didn't do bar mitzvahs. And they didn't even have a school. So my father found a conservative congregation not too far away, and I'm guessing that he probably had to join them in order to have a bar mitzvah. But I had to be trained, so they found an itinerant rabbi who came to our home maybe for a year or so to train me how to read Hebrew and to do my bar mitzvah work. And I'm told that I did it okay.
How did you feel about this?
Well, it was an event in my life, and they made a big party afterward, and it happens that the night of the party there was a blizzard, and it was very difficult for people to get home. But after that, though, I must have attended this little congregation for a short period of time, and it really wasn't terribly impressive, and I simply never went back.
Did you go then with your father and mother for the holidays?
Yes. Well, my mother never went to the shul. I only went with my father. And my mother was never really observant. And we visited my grandparents practically every weekend. And growing up, my mother was one of one of eight. There were three women and 5 boys. She was one of 8. My father was one of 5.
And your family was close?
We were close. We visited each other practically every week. I had lots of cousins. I don't have too many anymore.
You were an only child then?
I was an only child, and in those days, a family of 2 children was big, because it was during the Depression, and people simply couldn't afford more children. It was very expensive. But talking about my schooling, though, I was a good student.
Tell us about the high school you went to.
Well, I started out in grade school. I skipped a few times, so I was really ahead of my grade. And in junior high school, when I got out of the 9th grade, I guess it was.
Right.
I won a medal for scholarship.
Not surprised.
Not surprised. Then I went to boys' high school, and from there I went to the University of Pennsylvania, Wharton School. And of course I was 16 years old at the time, and all of my peers were, my fellow schoolmates were 2 or 3 years older than I was. So I was a little bit behind socially.
Not anymore. So when did you become involved with the Navy?
Well, I graduated from the University of Pennsylvania in 1941, and I had a degree in Bachelor of Science in Economics with a major in accounting. So when I graduated, I got a job as a junior accountant in a Wall Street firm. You might call them a boutique firm, because they had very, very high grade accounts, but they were a relatively small amount of
Clients.
Members. So that I started there in September of 1941, and of course, you know, within a few months we were in a war. And I have to backtrack a little bit, because I have to say that during my childhood I was obsessed with airplanes and flying. And when I was probably 8, 9, 10 years old, my parents would drive out to Roosevelt Field in Long Island so that I could watch the Ford Trimotors take off and landing. And at that time, I was absolutely possessed. I knew I had to fly. When I was at Penn, in my senior year, they offered a course in pilot training. And since I was underage, my parents had to sign a waiver. And they sent my parents home this waiver. And on the very last sentence of the waiver, it said, upon the successful completion of this course, you will be available at the pleasure of the United States Air Corps. And my parents refused to sign it. That was the end of my flying appearance there. Then when the war started, a very good dear friend of mine and I were very, very close. And he loved flying also. Never flew, but he liked it. And when the war started, we both said, let's become Navy pilots.
Sounds romantic.
That romantic, yes. Again, I was still not quite 21 years old, and my parents pleaded with me not to take this course. There was a course for college graduates, and he took the course, and I instead enlisted in the Navy in as soon as, my birthday is on February 28th, 1921, by the way.
Mhm.
But anyway, I waited a few days after my birthday, 25th birthday, and then I enlisted in the Navy at that time as an apprentice seaman with the hope to be sent to midshipman school to get a commission. This happened, and I went to Columbia Midshipman School, graduated in October of 1942, and that led to my Navy career.
That was very exciting. Do you want to tell us a little about some of the wonderful things you did while you were involved with the Navy?
I always remember one set of numbers, 3 years, 9 months, and 22 days was the extent of my active duty in the Navy. I was finally left active duty in April of 1946. My first assignment was to a new destroyer for the Pacific Fleet as a torpedo officer and assistant gunnery officer. And at that time, we also had an airplane on it, so I was also the catapult officer. I was on that ship for almost 2 years, out in the Pacific, and earned 5 battle stars and a combat action ribbon. And then I was rotated out after that point. And at that point, the amphibious forces needed action. So I was assigned as an executive officer of an LST, a landing ship tank, and also in the Pacific. It was a brand new ship. And I started out as the executive officer and navigator, and eventually became the commanding officer of that ship. And that's what I was when I finally left the ship in 1946.
After your career in the Navy, did you resume your work at home?
After I finished the Navy, I went back to the firm that had hired me in the first place at $25 a week back in 1941. They were very happy to give me my job back at the same price. And I decided that that was kind of ridiculous. And I was accepted as an agent for the Internal Revenue Service. And I was a revenue agent for a couple of years. And during that time, or late in that time rather, I had the good fortune to meet a young lady named Edna Mae Raisin. And after our third date, we had both agreed that we were for each other. My father-in-law was Charlie Raisin, who was a 10-year president of Temple Israel of New Rochelle, took me on a walk and tried to talk me out of it, saying that I don't know what I'm getting myself into.
Oh, but you did.
But I did, and 6 months after we met, we were married in September of 1948.
Is this what brought you close to Temple Israel?
That immediately brought me to Temple Israel, and we became members probably in 1950. We eventually had four children, Stephen, Barbara, Kathy, and Diane. And when my father-in-law passed away in 1967, members of the board of the temple came to our house and said, we would like to have somebody from the Raisin family join our board. And the other option was either me or my brother-in-law, Roy Raisin, who had absolutely no desire to be a part of the board. And so in November of 1967, I was elected to the board of Temple Israel of New Rochelle. And a year or so ago, I celebrated my 50th anniversary as a member of the board, and as you know, I still attend meetings and am involved in the meetings.
You keep us on the right path, Lee. You keep us honest. You keep us good. It's important that you're at these meetings because your contribution is amazing.
Well, the one thing that I left out was that I was finally president of Temple Israel from 1977 to 1981. And if anybody tells you that being president of anything is easy, it's not. It's always a bumpy road along the way. But we managed to survive. At that time, Temple Israel had a congregation of something like 1,700 families. And so it was a very, very big congregation. We were the biggest congregation between New York and Boston at that time.
Excuse me, were you part of the move from the Webster Avenue to this location?
Yes. Our early years, as a matter of fact, when we were at Webster, my first job there was as an usher during the High Holy Days. And after a couple of years of doing that, being the side aisle, I was finally promoted to the center aisle at usher. And that was long before 1967.
You followed a great path, and we are very fortunate that you have assumed the leadership and role here. Everyone emulates you and respects you for the things that you have done.
Well, thank you. In my early childhood, there were some things that I could talk about. I took trumpet lessons, and the boy downstairs who was, I told you that we were in a two-family house, and my best friend was living downstairs, and he took saxophone lessons, and we were about 9 months apart in age. So when we went to school, they had a show, and the two of us were asked to perform, and we did, except that there was one proviso. There had to be a curtain in front of us. We were so bashful that we had to have the curtain. In any event, when I went to Boys High, I was in their marching band and attended all of the football games on the field with the marching game. Then when I went to Penn, I was also in their marching group, and I was in that for a long time, for my entire time there at Penn.
Is this what began your interest in classical music? Because I know that you were a subscriber to Lincoln Center, and you enjoy all those things.
Actually, no. My parents had a Victrola at home when I was a child, and they had records of music. One was Caruso songs, and they were also. My parents used to go to opera, and they had operatic things also on the records. So my interest in music was not only to perform as a trumpeter, but I love music, and to the point where Edna May and I began to subscribe to the New York Philharmonic, and that was like 40 years ago, and we're still doing it. At least I am anyhow. In addition to that, we also were subscribers at Carnegie Hall for a small subscription series there. It used to be just the Boston Symphony that performed at Carnegie Hall, but then it gradually changed to a variety of different orchestras, and I'm still going to that. So, by the way, I'm going with my new partner in that is Roy Raisin's daughter, Jill, and she's my new partner, and along with her husband. So they go with me both to Carnegie Hall and to the New York Philharmonic. So I enjoy that.
I know you're looking forward to this weekend coming up, where we're
going to
a bunch of friends are going to Tanglewood.
And we would go in, we've been probably doing that for 30 years. And at one time, we had 2 busloads of people going to now we're down to 6 people, unhappily.
Well,
Well,
we have our
unfortunately,
memories of all the others.
yeah, but that was good. What else? What haven't I talked about?
Do you want to tell us a little about your children and your grandchildren?
I have 1 great grandchild as well. Yeah.
That is wonderful.
Stephen and his family, he has married Lori, and they have Rachel and Chloe. Rachel is just now entering NYU, and Chloe is going into high school in Chicago, where they live. Barbara had 3 children. She had Mark, Daniel, and Sarah. And Daniel just became a daddy of Jackson Brian Hayden, and that's my first great-grandchild. And Diane, they live in Brockville, Maryland, and my second daughter, Kathy, she's divorced, but she has Caitlin and Carly. Caitlin is a graduate of the Art Institute of Chicago, and Carly is a graduate of Sarah Lawrence, and she just got her master's at Columbia just a couple of months ago. And Diane is our youngest, and she lives in Virginia. She has 1 son, Cody, and he's now going to be going into college next year. So.
And you have a wonderful relationship with all the children, and maybe you would tell us about your yearly trips with the entire family.
I was just going to come to that. Many years ago, maybe 35, 40 years ago, we decided that between Christmas and New Year, when the children were not in school anymore, we took a vacation, and we usually it started out as a vacation in Florida, because my mother, who by the way lived to 102, lived in Miami Beach, and her birthday was December 20th. So we would be going to Florida every year to help her celebrate her birthday, and sometimes we went to a variety of hotels, not only in Miami Beach, but also in the Keys. We went to Key Largo and Isla Morada, and she would come with us. And after she passed away, which was in 2001, we began to go to different places, and we've been to all through the Caribbean. We went to Dominican Republic several times. We went to Cancun in Mexico. We went to Nuevo Vallarta in Mexico. We went to Rome, Italy. We gradually went. We went to Acapulco in Mexico also. We gradually grew from a few people, and now we're 18.
And that is a blessing.
And it is. We enjoy each other's company. 2 years ago, we went to Coronado in San Diego. That was because when we were in Nuevo Vallarta, Stephen's wife, Lori, caught the Zika, and she was hospitalized there for it. So if you may recall that there was a period of time that the entire Caribbean, Mexico, and even parts of Florida were not recommended for travel because of the Zika thing. However, this past year, the Zika warning was lifted, and when it was lifted, I emailed all of the women in our family who were either childbearing or potential for childbearing to ask whether they were available to go to Mexico again. And they all agreed that they were confident that it was okay. And so this December, we're going back to Nuevo Vallarta.
Sounds wonderful. You're always planning things, looking forward, reaching out, being in the moment, and that's what makes you such a special person, Lee.
Well, I appreciate that.
So, Lee, do you want to tell us a little about your checkered career?
Well, I don't know how checkered it was, because I think I mentioned earlier that I had an accounting background. And after I served in the Internal Revenue Service, and after I had met Edna May, her dad said, you know, we use an accounting firm, and maybe they can use somebody like you. And so they did offer me a position as a junior accountant, Irving Barron and Company. And over a period of time, I finally got my CPA degree. Once I got my CPA degree, then Charlie Raisin, my father-in-law, said, why don't you join me in my company, Transagram Company? And I said, okay, that sounds good.
What did they do?
Well, with toy manufacturers, and their principal factory was in Easton, Pennsylvania. So I knew nothing about toys or manufacturing. And so my first position in the company, Edna May and I had to move to Easton, Pennsylvania. And I went to that factory and went through every department in it, starting with the receiving department and every other department, in order to learn the business literally from the ground up. And eventually I came back to New York. We came back just in time for Stephen to be born in New York. And once we were back in New York, there was another factory in Long Island City. And so I went to that Long Island City factory for a period of time, and learning what was doing there. And then finally I was brought back into the New York office as an assistant to the controller, and began to learn the financial end of the company at that time. So I'm talking about a period of some number of years. The company grew, I grew along with the company, and eventually became its chief financial officer. We went public in 1962, I believe, over the counter, and then subsequently we were on the American Exchange. And then my father-in-law passed away. And because of complications in his estate, where his estate was primarily stock and Transagram Company, which had risen in price very, very fast because of a new product we had, to the point where the value of the stock was more than the estate could handle. So we actually had to sell the company.
Wow.
We sold the company to a man named Lamont DuPont Copeland Jr. He was the son of the chairman of the board of the DuPont Company. It's a sad story after that, because he gave us false financial statements, and we were practically got nothing out of the company. We sued him, but in Delaware, but you can't sue anybody by the name of DuPont in Delaware. And that took us to 1971, February 1971. By October 1971, Roy and I had been looking for other companies to purchase, and we purchased the F&B Doll Company, which was a very old and very nicely recognized company. neither one of us knew a thing about dolls, not even how to hold one, let alone how to sell one. But we had a woman designer, and we worked with that designer, and eventually we got on the right track, and we did very, very well with F&B. And after 15 years, we sold the company and retired.
That's quite a story. How are you enjoying your retirement? I know you like to play golf.
Well, before I started really playing golf, after I retired, I joined the American Arbitration Association, and I was an arbitrator for 20 years. And I enjoyed that very much. And I didn't retire from that until I was 90. Then I got interested in golf.
And you're still playing.
And I'm still playing at 98.
That's wonderful. And you're still one of the best drivers on the road.
I think so.
Yes.
I'm still driving, which is more important.
Very important.
Carefully, but confidently. So that's about I think I've told you as much of my history as I know.
And I know you make the most of every day, and we're so glad that you would share all your adventures with us today. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.